So in this video, we're going to have a look at all things recipes. We're going to cover what are recipes to begin with, how do they work, the increments side of recipes, which are super useful, saving, reusing the recipes, and lastly, there's an actual categories option within recipes, and we're going to answer the age-old question of, do you actually need that? So over to my Buildxact account here. To first of all intro this, we're going to answer what are recipes. And the easiest way to distinguish a recipe is to literally just compare it to a single item. So whereas I've got just this door here, or some fixing hardware, or some labor, or some architrave, all of those are single lines in Buildxact. And if I was looking at catalogs, they would be considered things that have come from an item catalog. So literally just single things, one item, one line, and on a price list, it would just be a list of items. A recipe, on the other hand, that's where we start grouping things together. So you can identify a recipe in the screen here because they're blue, or if you go into edit mode, the little recipe button is blue. But if I go like doors internal, the idea is that I've got all the items that belong with an internal door, and I bundled them together for a couple of reasons, really. One is when I'm doing the estimating and I go around and I count the internal doors, it's a heap quicker to just assign the door, the hardware, the hinges, all the different pieces to that count at once, rather than having to go and assign that number of internal doors to 10 different lines. So it's a speed thing. Also, they work really well as converters, so to speak. So as we go through and explain how they build, that'll kind of make more sense. But the short version here is I could count a number of each or dots on a plan, and it would look something like this. So literally just dot, 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 dot. Though you can do recipes in linear meters, cubic meters, square meters, literally anything you want. But each recipes are very useful. And I could say, hey, each of those dots contains a fraction of something. So if I was doing a recipe for example, for stumps, I can say how much concrete goes into each dot. There's one ant cap on that. There's one stump. There's a certain amount of labor. You can attribute literally everything that goes into it, and then it'll total it up over the exact number of stumps that you've counted. To do the example again, but for doors, let's go through this one in detail. So this is not only how it's going to measure when I do the takeoff, but it's also going to dictate how I put this stuff together down below. The golden rule of recipes is all of this list of items here, all of that fits into one of this always. So if it's an each recipe, I always want to tell it how much fits into one of those. If it's a linear meter recipe, I need to know what fits into one linear meter. And then when we do the takeoff, we get that little one sample size, one each, 1 meter, 1 square meter, whatever, and we multiply it by however big your takeoff is. So looking at this, in one door, internal, there is an internal door at $80. There's a jamb at $80. There's a hardware, so a handle at $80. There is 3 hinges at 50 cents each. Some of these prices are probably a bit out of date, and don't stress, honestly, too much about the prices. Focus more on how it's getting done. The skirting, I've got 11 meters. So 4 a side, plus a little bit, at $1.77 a meter, and 2 hours of labor per door to install. Now, I could convert this into really whatever I want. So like the skirt, I could, if I wanted to, say 2 lengths, 2 5.4 meter lengths, and price it as such to say they're like $8 a length, and it would figure it out in that way. You can do whatever you want. But once I've figured this out and I go and do the takeoff for 3 doors or 8 doors or however many I want, it's going to put the total along here. So you can see 24 hinges, 16 lengths of skirt, 16 hours of labor, 8 doors, 8 jambs, and then the relevant prices for that. So the way it got to say 24 here is it just went 3 times 8 is 24. And then it got to that price by saying 90 cents a hinge times 24 gives us the price total for all of the hinges across all of them. This price up here, this is the total price per door based on all the stuff that goes into one door. Now, if I was to, let's say we do, what are we going to do here? I'm going to do some examples for increments. In fact, to do this, I'm probably going to start another recipe just to make it a little easier. It's not going to be related to doors really at all. But let's say I do concrete per square meter. And I go build recipe. And I'm doing a slab that's 100 mil thick. Super simple example. There's absolutely not going to be everything in here because all I really want to show you is the increment part of it. But if I'm doing a slab that's 100 mil thick and I want to do the actual concrete per cubic meter, I find a lot of the time I pull out a piece of paper and sketch the shape that I'm making when I think this up. But in 1 square meter, if the concrete's 100 mil deep, then I'm literally making a shape that is 1 meter wide by 1 meter the other way by 100 mil deep. So 0.1 of a cube. And a cubic meter might be $180. Now, let's say I measure the slab at 145.21 meters. Perfect, this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted to show you that the problem you get, or that people bring to us as a question is, hey, I can't buy 0.521 of a cube. That's stupid. You should tell me this is 15 or the actual orderable amount. And that's exactly what the minimum and increment does. So it's saying, what's the minimum unit you can buy? Concrete's a perfect example. So is sand. Anything that's delivered generally, because they'll have a minimum delivery quantity. So my guy won't deliver anything below a cube. And after that, he'll happily go up in half cubes. So what that's saying is this number never drop below 1. And after you've crossed over 1, you should jump up in halves. I could do it in quarters too, and it would give me a similar result. But this is a great way to force it to, dictate what you want. And it means that you are estimating for the actual amount that you need, not getting a price that's short and then having to buy an amount that's more. And it's just super useful. If you go and save recipes, which is our next topic, so you go save as will save everything you've built as a recipe. It saves it into the catalogs area. So I'll save this example one. I put these into my recipes, which I know I've cheated. My catalogs area has a recipe called my recipes. If yours doesn't, literally just type in my recipes and it'll create one. And I'm putting this in a category called concreter. It's pretty clever. It should predict what categories are there. And what that means is when I go browse, I'm going to see not only the sample Buildxact ones, but my ones. And I can grab from any of those as I need to in the next jobs. So just to do that again, if I was coming here and I needed a recipe, you can actually just go concrete 100 mil and it will find it here. Personally, I always love browsing for things, so I use this one, the little recipe button, and then browse. And I go and look through all the lists. Generally, I have way too much stuff, and I just find this easier. Now, lucky last, actuals category. So we see some people who aren't really sure what this is and they fill it out in strange ways, or some people who need it and they don't use it. So it's worth just a quick point on what it is. Basically what this does is if you leave that blank, when you create the job, we just assume that all those recipe items should continue to live in this category. So when we move it through to the job, all the recipe items stay in this category in fixing carpentry. I'll go back to my door one, for example. If you, on the other hand, say, actually, no, when I do my job, I want to consolidate all the labor into one category. It's probably the most common example. You would do this. So all these top, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those top 5 would stay in the category that they were born in. And this one, when we go create job, it would be reassigned to a category that it would create if it didn't exist, called labor. So I'll quickly do that. Save. Create. And I'm flying through this because there's a whole other videos on how to make jobs. But the main part to show you is that that labor part got stripped out and sent into its own category, as opposed to my fixing carpentry, where the rest of my door, jam, hardware, all of that got sent to. Lucky last point is only the final quantity gets sent here from my hinges, skirt lengths, etc. So this is just ready to go for purchase ordering, which again, there's another video on that. Lovely. Hopefully that makes a heap of sense and gives you a bunch of information about whether you want to use recipes, and if so, how to do it. Any questions, as always, let us know. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you.